We haven't got much time. We've got just over half an hour before the third session starts. Commissioner Hahn has got about 10 minutes to make his opening remarks. I have a few questions of my own, and let me start with them, Commissioner. Is the Balkan enlargement process becoming stuck in transition, the term that the EBRD has used? Are we in danger of seeing a sort of never-ending process that is going to finally just wear itself out? In other words, are the Western Balkans in limbo?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me, Gilles and Friends of Europe and Konrad Adenauer Foundation. Second, I would like to explain, I could really, for good reasons, applaud to the singer because I was following him from outside, but I didn't want to disturb. So it was a great performance, also thanks on my side. To your question, Gilles, I think we are not stuck, but it's important to understand that after all our experiences of, concerning enlargement and the situation in Europe amongst member states, in member states, and the situation of our candidate countries, we have to understand that when we are today talking about enlargement, then we are talking, or I prefer not to talk about enlargement negotiations, but about a process. That means it's not only about, so to say, taking over the acquis, but also, so to say, implement the spirit of the acquis. And this is definitely something which takes time. I mean, if I'm looking, I see friends from Albania. Welcome, and I mean, in Albania they have just adopted a couple of months ago, unanimously in the parliament, a very comprehensive judiciary reform. And I really want to congratulate the representatives from the opposition party for, so to say, having taken this step and this decision, because it's so far, it was rather unusual, may I say so, and not only in Albania, but in many other parliaments in the region, that the opposition is voting with the government. But if you look into the statistics of, may I say, parliaments, national parliaments, European Parliament, there is, I would say, 80–90% of the decisions are taken by a huge majority, including one or the other opposition party. Sometimes it's even adopted unanimously. So it's not something unusual if an opposition party is in a certain, on a certain topic, on a certain solution, agreeing with the government, favoring, so to say, the overall development of a country. And this is also something which has to be changed in the region. If I may say so, very humble, there is still this, so to say, general behavior to think either in black or in white. Yeah? So to say, the compromise, the ability to strike a compromise is not really, so to say, deeply rooted as a concept. But in a democracy, you need compromises. And a good compromise is a win-win situation for both, or for all involved parties. So this is what I mean when talking about, so to say, it's about the process. Take the fight against corruption. In all our countries, we have already state-of-the-art, if you allow, or if you legislation concerning the fight against corruption in force. But the question is how it is applied, how it is implemented. And here we are looking for a credible, sustainable track record which gives us as much as possible reassurance that we are, or the country, is on a good track. And this is simply something which takes time, number one. Number two, we cannot, so say, cut out the economic situation in Europe and in the region. So my aim is to push the economic development of these countries, giving people there a perspective to stay and not to feel or to be forced to move away, having job opportunities, having simply a perspective for themselves, but also for their families. And this is something which takes its time. In many of these countries, so say, diversification of the economy is not very widespread. Here we have to address. I think in general the labor force is quite skilled, but there is a risk that the best ones are migrating. And we are still, and I can say this as a former Austrian Minister for Science and Research, already 10 years ago, the issue, and probably even many years before, the issue of brain drain was there and is still there, but it is something we have to address. So I think the economic development is extremely important to stabilize the region, to stabilize the country, the countries, and pushing the economic development also has an impact on the so-called fundamentals, which means rule of law, because you will never attract foreign investors. You will never persuade or convince people in the countries to risk their money if they cannot rely on the independence of the judiciary and things like that. So I think there is an interdependency between development of the economy and development of rule of law. I fully agree, and probably this is shared by probably most of you or all of you. A lot of progress is still necessary. We all tend to be impatient for good reasons, but if I take everything together, if I'm looking into the performance of all the 6 countries in the region, I would say there is progress everywhere. But you have to look over a longer time span, of course, to see one or the other progress. We will not be there tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, but it's important to make the necessary step forward, progress, also to give confidence in the whole process. And finally, we have also to convince our citizens, European Union citizens, how important this future accession of our friends and colleagues in the Western Balkans is. It's a kind of competition, what they call the Annus Mirabilis 1989. I mean, it was the fall of the Iron Curtain, unification of Europe, first important step, big accession around in 2004, and then Romania, Bulgaria, and Croatia later on. But this has, from my point of view, to be completed. But in order to achieve this goal, we have to work together. Today, we have to understand that in many parts of Europe, I would call it, so say, the support for these activities is not a big one. Probably in most of the countries today, there is a majority of people against further enlargement. But I think here we have a task to communicate what is the impact, what are the consequences if we would fail on this. And I think the inclusion of these 6 countries to the European Union is a must. I cannot predict the date, but my aim is clearly to use the remaining time of my mandate to push the countries forward, to lay a ground, a basis which is irreversible in terms of the European aspiration of these countries. And it's also for the stability and security of the other parts of Europe if we have stability, security, prosperity in the region. And this can definitely only be achieved with the European perspective. A first, so to say, step in between is this regional cooperation, which we call Berlin process, where through very concrete measures in the area of transport, connectivity, energy, but also people to people, pushing for a Balkan single market, things can go into the right direction. And only yesterday we had a meeting with the transport ministers of the region here in Brussels to prepare the next summit in Italy summer next year. I expect that in the next couple of months we will have the first groundbreaking events in the region so that people now really see the visible results of our efforts, not only read and listen about conferences there and there, but also to see clear and concrete results. So if I take things together, I think we are in general on a good path, but it also demands cooperation amongst the players in the region. One has still to work on reconciliation, but I count a lot on the younger generation to overcome many of the problems of the past because they haven't been part of it. So they can really go and approach each other. And therefore, one of our key areas in the regional cooperation is this people-to-people activity, which is aiming explicitly to young people, not only to students, but also to apprentices and young entrepreneurs. Everybody should have the opportunity to travel around, to use the opportunities, to use a market of around 20 million people. And if this is possible, I'm deeply convinced that the region can make the necessary progress in the two important areas, economic situation and fundamentals. And this would also mean, so to say, a societal progress. Finally, I think the best judgment about our successful way is when guest workers from this region in other European countries will say, now the situation in my home country is much better, I would like to move back. I think this is the best message we can give to our other colleagues in other European citizens. And then these people, our citizens, have the reassurance that we have done our job. Once again, it will take some time, no doubt, but important is to stay committed, to have a clear vision, and the vision is definitely the European perspective.
What you just said, Commissioner, tempts me to raise the issue of the migrant crisis and closing of frontiers, but I won't. I'm going to open the floor. We don't have very much time, so we can take 2 or 3 questions, providing they're short questions, and elicit a short answer. So, can I see over there? Yep. Could we have a microphone here? And could I ask everybody to introduce themselves and to keep their question very short?
Thank you, Mr. Merit. My name is Lulzim Basha. I'm the chair of the Democratic Party, leader of the opposition in Albania. I was told by the organizers I would have an opportunity to present very briefly my view, not only the view of the government. I'm not going to take more time than a question. To, first of all, salute Commissioner Hahn and thank him for the great support that he's given to all of our countries on a very, very difficult and challenging path to European integration. I have 3 points that I want to make very briefly. Yes, it is true that we approved unanimously the justice reform, but Commissioner Hahn is being modest. We only did so after Commissioner Hahn and others weighed very heavily to determine a product that reflected European norms and values, which we as opposition, we are seeking from the very beginning. And strangely, the government that should have been the proponent of the force for the reform was resisting, very much along the lines what was said in the dinner last night. Leaders that refused to give up power, and in fact, even in such a reform, see the opportunity to grab power instead of ceding to a basis of European identity, which is the separation of powers, a functioning judiciary. So this compromise was made possible because of direct European Union investment in the process. Without it, we would have had no compromise on the justice reform. And that is a sad fact. Even sadder is the fact that in the last year, more than 100,000 Albanians have left the country. Most of that to Germany, Netherlands, and other European countries. A lot of them seeking political asylum. And this has become a huge problem. In some countries, the number of Albanians seeking political asylum was higher than the number of Syrians. Why? The Commissioner said it. Because people see no perspective. Because we have built a system in Albania, and I believe at large and also in other parts of the Balkans, where the good, the best, do not get ahead. This is the paradox. The people my country needs the most are the ones who are fleeing the country. This is the paradox. Why? Because they cannot get ahead. Let me give you two examples. They can
very
brief. This is my
short.
last point. Two examples. The country punishes the capable, the talented, the creatives. It doesn't give them the opportunity to move ahead. But if you are a former convict, you become, or for drugs or for trafficking, you become a mayor, you become a member of parliament. We pass a law and the law is not implemented. Look at the current problem we have with drugs. 50% of our GDP, according to BBC World Service on Thursday, is comprised of narcotics. Which means if you're an honest farmer, you do not get ahead. You are forced to grow cannabis. And by now, that is a political problem. My last point is this. Rule of law and democracy are non-negotiable. We are fighting this fight for the implementation of the law on decriminalization, to speak loudly about the drug problem, which is not a drug problem, but it's a political problem in my country now. But we are attacked. So is the media, national and international. And even when members of parliament from friendly countries, countries that have spent billions on my country's democracy and rule of law, come and speak about it, they are attacked. Refusing to acknowledge this problem is not helping the problem. That's why we need the support of everyone. First of all, to acknowledge the problems and to fight them together. Having said that, I full-heartedly support the recommendation of the Commission. As leader of the opposition, I have spent today and yesterday in Essen asking from our friends in the European People's Party to pass a positive decision on the Council this December. But we'll continue to need your help and your attention to deal with the tremendous problems our country is going through.
Thank you very much indeed. Any questions? Over there.
Kurt Geisert, Association of German Mittelstand. Commissioner Hahn, I could listen 2 weeks ago to Vice President Katainen. He was satisfied with the start of the Juncker plan, not so much for the new member states with the exception of Slovenia. Are you afraid that something similar can happen for the 6 states of the Western Balkan once they will be able to profit from the Juncker plan? Thank you.
Why don't we take a couple more questions and group them up? Yeah, over there.
Good afternoon, Jana Repanšak, Center of Excellence in Finance, based in Slovenia. Commissioner Hahn, you mentioned brain drain and the need to address it. How specifically you see that this can be addressed? My institution is focusing on capacity development of finance ministries, line ministries and central banks in Southeast Europe. And what we see is that they have lower capacity that they could have because of the drain of brain, first to the private sector and then abroad. But how specifically can this be addressed?
Thank you very much. I'll take one more over there, yeah.
Thank you. Alba Brojka from College of Europe, International Relations and Diplomacy FEU program. Well, I have a question regarding the integration process. And as you clearly made the point that Europe is trying to transpose all these norms and values like rule of law and justice and good governance to the Western Balkans. However, I see a gap between the assistance or advisory or reform in the economic sector related to the normative power Europe. Because to my understanding, EU is neglecting this sector, and as long as we don't have a strong economic sector, we cannot have the implementation of all these norms and rules from the European Union. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any more questions? Yeah, we'll take that one.
Hello, I'm Lolita, also from the College of Europe. Well, as you said, Commissioner Hahn, that the clear vision of these enlargement countries is the European perspective. My country's perspective is the European perspective. I'm coming from Macedonia, and I would like to raise the issue about the young perspective. The perspective of young people in this enlargement process. As you said, it's a process, but how can we want our voice to be heard, and can we rely on the European Commission and precisely on this enlargement process? Because if we are talking about rule of law and equality, I think that we also, the young people from the Balkans, we deserve to be equal and to have equal opportunities as our European Union fellow students, friends, because European Union is very important for us, for the young people from the Balkans. Thank you.
Thanks very much. One last one over there, yeah.
Thank you. Valbona Zefi from EU Policy Hub Albania, and we are a forum of 36 young professionals who went back to Albania to monitor and influence positively the European integration process. Within this aspect, I would like to ask Mr. Hahn, how do you see the role of civil society into the European integration process of the whole Western Balkan countries? Thank you.
There, Commissioner, a set of huge questions, to which I will add one more, which is very short. Last night at the pre-conference dinner for speakers, one of the speakers said, what we're getting from the European Union is about 3% of our needs. I pointed out the money isn't growing on trees in Brussels these days. But what's your view on that shortfall, that enormous shortfall? Are we looking at a Western Balkans economy that is going to find it almost impossible to climb out of the hole that it finds itself in?
Well, thank you for all your questions, and I think they have a lot in common, and it's about the economy. And also, when having been asked how we can so to say fight against brain drain and things like that, I can tell you when I came into office as a Commissioner for Regional Policy in 2010, I was confronted with two phenomena. Number one was, at that time, we had already, from the previous multi-annual financial agreement, a budget line for energy efficiency, renewable energy, and this money was not used. And I had to travel around in Europe, but also neighboring countries, Eastern Europe, to promote the idea of energy efficiency, to make clear what it means. And in a way related to it, I remember very well preparing my first hearing, etc., in the European Parliament, the colleagues from the, I call it newer member states, across all the different parties, they were rather focused on roads, maybe railways. When I was talking about pushing the economy, investing in research, this was not an, they always said, first we need roads. Yeah? I said, well, it's good to have roads, but you need also to have trucks which can use it, trucks which are transporting goods, etc. So, and after 5 years, I think we have made significant progress. The mindset in these countries has changed. I introduced in the already mentioned reform of the regional policy, there's one area where we introduced an obligatory minimum, so to say, budget share, and this was or is 20% of the overall budget has to be used for renewable energy, energy efficiency measures. And may I say, when we received proposals from member states, how they would like to use the structural funds in order to push the regional development, already due to the proposals, the share of money which should be invested in renewable, in energy efficiency measures like that, was 38%. So it was not any longer a discussion to push them to achieve this 20% goal, but on their own, they already reached 38. And this is what I mean with a combination of patience and passionate. You need both. You have to have clear goals, and you have to be determined to it, and then I think you can reach the goals. But it takes a lot of communication, a lot of discussions, conviction work, etc. And if we improve, so to say, in general, the economic situation, this has an immediate impact also on research, on innovation. We have, for instance, in the last couple of years in the region invested in startup facilities, in incubators, in technology parks, where a lot of young people, and not only young people, but mostly young people, have founded their own companies, very often spin-offs of universities. So there is potential. And it's important simply to give first advice, to give some offer, of course also to provide money. But may I say, very often, it's not only the money. It's more than that. Yeah? For instance, startups. I have in my previous life, so say, I have a previous life as a businessman. And I know the first 1 or 2 years of a company are the most risky ones. If you survive after 1 or 2 years, it might go well. What is needed at the beginning is support, assistance, for instance, in marketing or in accounting, because very often people founding a company have expertise on a particular issue, but they don't know anything about marketing or accounting. And here you need help, you need support, you need, of course, also access to financing. But these are areas where, of course, always some money is needed. But money is not always the only thing. It's about, so to say, the whole package which you have to provide and to present. And then I think a lot can be possible. And once again, if we push the economy, if we create a Balkan single market, I mean, honestly, it's in a way a surprise, and it's not a surprise. But with the exemption of Albania, all the other countries have been members of the former Yugoslavia. But apparently the first aim was to create as much as possible many distinctions between each other and to create formal and informal barriers, which we have now to crash down. I mean, none of these countries is a big market. Together, in European terms, it's an upper medium-sized market. But in order to achieve this, we have to, so to say, revert some of the measures of the recent past. Also, this is something which is not dealing with money, it's dealing with political will. And this is necessary. And here we need definitely leadership in the country, in the region, but also on our side. It's, as you said, a joint effort. It's only achievable if we're all working together. Civil society, extremely important, but I also have to say, in some of these countries, I have the feeling the civil society is eager to stay away from politics. Yeah? But, I mean, civil society is one part of politics. And it's about getting involved. I understand it's about credibility of certain civil society organizations. But on the other hand, I can only urge representatives from civil society to candidate, to run for parliament. I think a good example is with all up and downs Ukraine, so to say, the Maidan movement. Many people from the Maidan movement, from civil society, have decided to candidate for the Rada. They are now there. It's not easy for them, so to say, to keep their, let's say, moral and intellectual independency. But I think they're making a strong contribution with all the problems. And this is something, I think there is still a lot of room for improvement in the region. I remember when I was first time together with Federica Mogherini in Bosnia-Herzegovina, we had a meeting with representatives from civil society. It was an excellent meeting. Young people, elder people, women, men, different interests, different religions, crossover. And immediately afterwards, we had a meeting with the 9 political leaders of the country, all of them men, 50 plus. So it was like a parallel world. And I would say the first meeting was more mirroring the societal situation. But this is something where everybody has a certain responsibility. And honestly, it's not the task, or at least not the permanent task of the European Union, the European Commission, to play the missing link between the both. For a certain transition period, yes, of course, but finally there should be, so to say, an inclusion between the two, and it's about policy shaping. Policy shaping can be achieved on several ways, but finally decisions are taken by the elected representatives in the parliament, and therefore I can only urge all of you and all the others who are interested to move from policy shaping to policy decision making to make this necessary step. And honestly, I believe it's good for the country if, so to say, the political structure is a little bit shaked up. And it's not always easy. Sometimes it could be more comfortable to stay away as honorable members of civil society, but believe me, at the end of the day, it's important to get involved, to take responsibility, and to see, may I say, there's a, if I look into the audience, a little bit older men, having around 40 years of experience in politics, it's not always easy to get a majority. But it's an extremely valuable experience to see how difficult it is to get a majority, to gather people behind or around you. And this is something which is needed. It is quite nice to have one precise opinion, but many others have also one precise opinion, not automatically the same one. And finally, you have to find a compromise. And this is something which is extremely needed into the region. There was one, question by the colleague from Germany. Honestly, I don't see concerning the use of the Juncker Fund. It's definitely related to the performance of a national economy. Is the economy diversified, yes or no? In Northern and Western Europe, economy is more diversified. Therefore, it was much easier for them to use the offer. But as a consequence of, so to say, this first round, we have tried to change a little bit the rules of the game in order to support those who are more in need, in order to achieve exactly what we need, diversification, and this means more jobs.
Commissioner, you've answered every question that's been put to you. We're running out of time. So I'm going to thank you very, very much indeed for a really interesting